Brock Purdy's leading the odds in the MVP race, right? And I think, obviously, if you're a fan of the 49ers, that's sort of an exciting thing, the idea that someone from your favorite team is leading the MVP race. But if you ask most 49er fans, hey, who's the most important player or who's the best player who's been the key to all of this, I think most 49er fans would say Brock for MVP. But no, not the most important player on our own team. You might have two different answers to that.
Right, and it's what I've been saying for the better part of a year now, and the fact that Brock is an MVP has changed my tune a little bit, but still in terms of who's the most important player on the team, well, we've seen how this team exists without number 71, for example, and you can't run the ball, and you have a hard time moving the ball, and you don't really score as much as you normally do when you don't have Trent Williams on the field. And Deebo Samuel to a similar extent, although I would put Christian McCaffrey ahead of Deebo. I would say Trent and CMC would be number 1 and number 2 for me in terms of most valuable 49er, MVF.
Brian Baldinger said this to the Morning Roast yesterday. Take a spin here.
Brock goes down on the 6th play of the NFC Championship game. The game was over. That's why. Because you can't, look, Jake Browning played lights out last night and won a shootout with, Trevor Lawrence. That offense hadn't looked that good all year. It's the best it's looked all year. And the quarterback was fantastic. It was virtuoso performance. So the quarterbacks make the secretaries better, quite honestly. They make the equipment managers better. They make everybody better. Here's the thing is you can't decide in a particular year, maybe this year, you go, let's give it to somebody else besides the quarterback.
No doubt.
Like if the quarterback is deserving, the quarterback is deserving. Right. If all the quarterbacks are just flubbing out there and throwing picks, right, and everybody's winning in spite of their quarterback, all right, let's look someplace else.
I don't like isms. It's why we've coined draftism here. Isms tend to be very negative words in our language. So let me go ahead and apologize because I'm about to create one. This is an ism. This is non-quarterbackism that's basically happening in our society, and unfortunately, I'm all for it. Brian's absolutely right. I don't make the rules. I'm sorry about this. Apologies to Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey and Myles Garrett and whoever else you want to talk about. I've reached a point of complete and total comfortability with this fact. The MVP should always be a quarterback. That doesn't mean that Brock Purdy is the best 49er, maybe even the most outstanding 49er. That probably is Christian McCaffrey. But Peter King said something to us yesterday that stuck out to me because he was building toward an answer, and then he gave me a different one than I thought. Remember when he was like, what do you guys, if I had Mike McDaniel in a quiet room, what do you think he would say if we're going into a big game and I told him he could only have Tua or Tyreek Hill? And I was like, ooh, good point, Peter. You're going to say Tyreek Hill. And he's building to his answer, and he goes, it's obviously Tua. Obviously Tua. And if that's the case, then what are we doing? This is a quarterback award, because it should be.
It's not, and it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't always go that way. When you have another player have an extraordinary year, and Peter made this point in his answer talking about Tyreek Hill, if Tyreek goes over 2,000 receiving yards in 16 games and then sets the new bar at wherever he sets it, which is a possibility, then he will get some strong consideration, as he should. And I do think the Peter King answer is more nuanced than that because it's determined by who the backup is. So you go from Tua to Mike White or Skylar Thompson. That's a different story than going from Tyreek Hill to Jalen Waddle and whatever other receiver you want to put on the field. The drop-off is not nearly as dramatic. And that, to me, is a big part of the conversation. Back to the Baldy sound, and Baldy's wrong in that the game was not over when Brock Purdy got hurt. In fact, the game was tied midway through the second quarter because Josh Johnson... No, are you telling me that a game that's 7-7 is that game over?
With Josh Johnson quarterbacking.
Incorrect.
Yes.
When you lost Josh Johnson,
couldn't disagree with
the game was over. When you lost Brock Purdy, it definitely hampered your chance to still win, but you had a quarterback.
I mean...
And that quarterback led you to a point where the game was still tied in the second quarter.
Come on.
It's nonsense to say that the game was over when Brock Purdy was hurt.
What you're saying
the game was
nonsense.
over when you lost the backup quarterback.
What was the spread in the game?
I don't have it here. Let me look.
Do you remember?
It was probably Eagles by 4.
Okay. Let's say it was. It doesn't even matter.
2.5.
2.5. Eagles
by 2.5.
All right. Now, what if that game before it started, Josh Johnson was announced as the QB?
Probably goes up to like 8 or 9.
Oh, God. Double digits.
You think Brock Purdy's worth 10 points? We went through this exercise earlier in the year.
If it's Josh Johnson.
Only Patrick Mahomes is worth 8.
Fourth stringer. Like, we look around the league and you can see it. You can see it everywhere. The minute Joe Burrow goes out, I know they won a game the other night. Cool.
Looks like looked amazing.
No, he did last night. The week before, they couldn't score. So, or 2 nights ago, whatever. And I don't know if he looked amazing. He looked good. But the bottom line is the minute Burrow goes out, we're like, see him. That's the end of the Bengals. They've been eliminated from this whole thing. Hell, college football decided to eliminate an entire team from the race because they lost their quarterback.
That's a boardroom decision. That's not a football game.
I get it, but you also are fully aware of the data and the history here. You cannot replace great quarterbacks unless something crazy happens. Now, Brock was this once upon a time. So I'm not for what college football did to Florida State. It's absurd. It completely removes the possibility that there's a star on your bench that you don't even know about. But the idea that you can normally replace a quarterback just because you have another one on your roster that technically has the same letters next to his name as a position has been proven incorrect over and over and over again.
Right. Backup quarterbacks have never come in won football games.
A hell of a lot less often than you're making it sound like.
I'm only making it sound like the way that the game actually went, which is the backup came in and tied the game
Dibs,
up. The backup quarterback was quarterbacking. Yes, and the game got away from him.
You saw what happened when the Niners played something. You called this a rematch. Okay.
This was not a rematch.
Well, I said it wasn't. You said it was last week. You said it 5 times.
It was a rematch in that these teams played in the NFC Championship game, but the game obviously was different because you had different personnel.
I mean,
you can call it whatever you want. All I'm saying is that when you lost your second quarterback, that's when the game was over. And yes, your chances of winning with Josh Johnson were greatly diminished, but you had a quarterback.
Yeah, all I can tell you is what was in my belly when that happened. Yeah. The game was over. The game was over. Brock Purdy came in and surprised us back against the Miami Dolphins a handful of weeks before, but we all had the same feeling when Jimmy got hurt. Well, that's the end of that season, but a star was born. But Josh Johnson is a career backup veteran who we've watched with 48 different teams.
Yeah.
Many of them 3 or 4 times in a row. He's not someone who can function as an effective quarterback in the NFL. He can, hold things together in some form.
Right.
The NFC title game, that's high level.
Of course. But when they scored to tie the game, you didn't think at all maybe?
No,
maybe
I did not. Christian McCaffrey busted a run. Forgive me for still thinking that thing was cooked like burnt toast.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely cooked.
Did you turn it off?
Of course not.
Okay.
I sat there dejected the whole time. I never got excited about the game again. There was never a feeling like we were ever going to.
You and I are different.
Fine.
Yeah.
Well, that's been proven over and over.
For sure.
So
I'm not saying that I was live betting the Niners at whatever the line jumped to.
To me, I know we have a hard time with this because as sports fans, whether it's that we want fairness or just stick-to-itiveness, determination, all of those things, we're ignoring the facts of the matter, which is that probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a 90% clip, if you've got a good quarterback and he gets hurt, you're done. Look at the Rams this year. Oh, they're kind of in it. No, they're not. Oh, now they're back. Gee, what happened? Their quarterback got healthy. You can't replace those guys. If Mahomes goes down, wrap. If Josh Allen goes down, night. And apologies to David Carr, but if Jalen Hurts gets hurt, night. Marcus Mariota is never going to take that team anywhere, no matter what his position or history is.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. There's not a lot of these guys. That's why the MVP is always one of these guys.
Well, the MVP is not always one of these guys.
How long has it been since it was someone else?
It was Adrian Peterson last time, and he set a record. And so when you have a record-setting performance, which we may have this year, if Tyreek maintains this pace, you may see it happen again, because the consensus on who the best quarterback is, it doesn't exist. And if Dak Prescott continues to play the way he's playing for Dallas, and a team that is being watched by as many voters as who watch the 49ers, you're going to see some votes come in for Dak. And, as I was mentioning during the show meeting, I believe the voting now is a first, second, and third choice situation where points are allocated for first, second, and third. And if you're not in anybody's top three, and I do think that some people will leave Brock Purdy out of their top three for all the reasons that we've heard about.
Ooh, right now?
I would imagine, yes.
There's definitely that possibility down the road. We're way too early to even dive into this. Sure. He's leading it right now, and you're right. He might not be by Sunday night.
Leading according to the odds makers.
Yeah, odds
makers.
There's
been no straw poll. There's no exit polling.
No, but we've heard from two MVP voters who've been doing it for a long time, who have a lot of name value in this town. Today, both of them, within the last 24 hours, stated that their vote right now would go to Brock. I have very little doubt that if the vote were to take place today, he would win, which is worth absolutely nothing because the vote doesn't happen today. But I firmly believe that Brock Purdy would be the MVP if your vote happened today, for whatever that's worth. Tyreek Hill is on pace to obliterate that record, yet the odds makers don't even have him in the top 5. So I know that it's not against the rules, and I'm not even saying that it should be. But I'm with Baldy. If any quarterback has the goods, the numbers and the record and all of those things, then he gets it. He gets it because the quarterback is flat out more important than every other position. It's why teams trip over themselves to try to find one every year. Because if you don't have one, you're still at the starting blocks.
Yeah, and if you have one, you probably need two, because the majority of teams this year have started more than one guy. So I do think that there's value in having Sam Darnold, just in case. You'd rather have Sam Darnold than Josh Johnson, certainly, as your backup. And Josh Johnson was QB4 last year, and he wound up on the field. So having just one quarterback is usually not enough.